So much stuff that I'm going to tell you about here that you may ask yourself, how does she do all these things? How does she go and organize atheists in her community down in the South in Alabama? How does she go stand up to the Mobile City Council when they try to put it in God We Trust plaque on their city plaza? How does she then persist forth when she gets death threats? How does she go on to end up working with the LGBT community in Alabama to enact the first hate crimes laws for LGBT protections in Alabama? How does she go on to lobby her state legislature on all sorts of issues? How does she go on to win the American Atheist Scholarship for students? How does she go on to win the Freedom from Religion Foundation Scholarship for students? How does she go on to win the Secular Student Alliance Scholarship? How does she go on to get awards for Outstanding Activism? Well, let me tell you, man, the woman is non-stop.
Yes!
It's my extreme pleasure to welcome to the stage one of my very favorite activists who also, in addition to all that stuff, also gives me poems to help me recharge as an activist myself, Amanda Scott. Please give her a big, big welcome.
Hello, everyone. That was a really amazing introduction. I'm not sure I can really live up to that, but all right, how do we do this? Okay, so I am going to talk about how to take our secular activism off of campus. And you might be wondering, well, this is the Secular Student Alliance. Why do you want to take us off campus? Shouldn't we be on campus? But I think that our political power can be seen in greater numbers once we get involved in the community. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. All right, so my first suggestion is, let's see. You working on it? Okay. This happened last year as well. Oh, hello. Okay, is it back on? Okay, excellent. All right, so one of the first things I would suggest, and this is, completely optional if you're opposed to party politics, but one great way to get involved in activism outside of campus is to join a local party dedicated to youth. For example, there's the Young Democrats, the Young Republicans, the Young Americans for Liberty, and the Young Democratic Socialists. And what these groups do is really incredible. They organize meetings, they have outreach at local events, they have lobby days, and all kinds of different things that you can get involved with. And if you're not really familiar with the community outside of your campus, I think this is the best step, because you'll have an infrastructure to look at and integrate into without having to start out on your own. Okay. The second suggestion is to build coalitions. As we've seen from our previous speakers, it's really important that we affiliate with other causes and other organizations that support and are allies to us. Some of those organizations are the American Civil Liberties Union, Planned Parenthood, as we heard earlier today, the Human Rights Campaign, and interfaith groups. What this will allow you to do is to have access to their infrastructure. They also organize their own lobby days and government meetings and testimonials and other things that you can get involved with. While you're doing that, you're forming connections in the local community that will really help you get involved. So I asked my boyfriend, if you were going to do a presentation on how to get involved in local politics, what would you do? And he said, well, most of politics is joining lists and showing up. And that is really, really, really true. If you can get on enough local lists, like the local NAACP or the local ACLU or the local Planned Parenthood, they will connect you to so many different opportunities to get involved. And just show up. Showing up is half the battle, and all of you have showed up, so that's a really good sign. Another way to think about this is to know the issues. It's so important to keep up with the news. I know we all love to look at cat videos and things on the internet, but it's very important to be informed. And it's important to know your state representatives, your local council members, and other local government officials who are impacting you personally with their decisions. So once you have kept up with the news and you found your local representatives, you want to track relevant legislation. You want to know what is going on in my state house, what's going on in my local city council. And luckily, there are a lot of resources to do that. Usually, your state congressman will have their own website, and the legislature will also have its own website, and you can track relevant legislation that's important to you. You can do it by current session, committee like education or health, and subjects such as religion or abortion. You'd be really surprised what they do under the nose of the media and the public that isn't being talked about. There may be an anti-abortion bill, there may be a pro-10 commandments bill that hasn't even been talked about, but you could bring attention to those issues by being informed and writing to them, calling them, tweeting at them. That's very important. Another thing is to get social. Social media is super, super, super important. So you want to track issues of interest, reproductive rights, secular activism, atheist advocacy. You want to follow key people and organizations. So you want to be, following August, you want to be following Pete, you want to be following all these great people, and you want to follow these organizations that work on these issues. You want to join a Twitter chat, maybe you want to talk about restoring voting rights. Well, there's always different types of Twitter chats that you can participate in. And you can tweet at public officials. This is actually really fun. Just tweet at a public official and say, hey, I condemn this particular bill that you have introduced. I'm a constituent. This is very concerning to me. And you'd be surprised. You will actually get a tweet back. Maybe it's by their staff person. Another thing is live tweet events. That's really, really exciting and very important to show that people actually show up and care about these issues. Like, for instance, this coming Tuesday, I'll be going to the House of Representatives to hear about the First Amendment Defense Act, which would allow basically what it would do is it would allow LGBT discrimination motivated by religion. And so what I'm going to do, if allowed, is to live tweet this. I'm really going to talk about which representatives are there, which ones are supporting this, who introduced this, why are they concerned with allowing religion to interfere with anti-discrimination laws. And that's one way to really shine a light on what they're doing. Another fun thing to do is to write op-eds. And you're probably thinking, well, everybody blogs and tweets. Why do you want to write op-eds? Well, there's a lot of people in the local community that, they don't follow social media or they don't follow the internet. And so what you can do is you can publish an op-ed in your local newspaper. And it sounds archaic, but it's actually very effective. So when I founded my organization, Mobile Equality, which is dedicated to achieving LGBT rights, I wrote a series of op-eds. And so my first one was on the need for a non-discrimination ordinance in Mobile. And the second one, which was the most popular, was on the need to amend Alabama's hate crime law to protect LGBT persons. And this one was so effective, it got over 1,000 shares on social media. And this was just an op-ed in the local newspaper. I had calls from Alabama legislators saying, hey, I read your op-ed. We're actually trying to introduce something like this and get it out of committee. And I'm like, you read my op-ed? That's amazing. And it went even further, actually. The Matthew Shepard Foundation, they found out about the op-ed. They shared it. Different national news organizations had contacted me about it, and I was like, wow, all because I wrote an op-ed in my local newspaper, but it's actually pretty effective. And so once you've decided that you want to write op-eds, something you want to do is you want to choose a recent, timely topic, For instance, the murder of unarmed black men, or you want to talk about a particular anti-LGBT bill or an anti-abortion bill that's been in the news, and you want to develop talking points, key talking points, about 3 to 5 points that you introduce and then you explain and have supporting arguments for them. So it's very concise. You're not just rambling. It actually looks structured. And you also want to use like plain English that the reader can understand, right? Because you don't want to use a lot of jargon that's legal or public policy based. You want it so where your grandmother who's reading the paper will see that and understand what you're saying and why the issue you're writing about is important. And you want to include a brief bio. You want to say, oh, so-and-so who wrote this op-ed, they're a student at the Ohio State University. They're involved in Planned Parenthood. They're a member of the Secular Student Alliance. And that's a great way to get publicity for you as well. And with that, I open the floor up for questions. I've spoken so many times, but I'm still nervous every time. Okay, in the back, on the left.
So I like the idea about writing op-eds and kind of know what you do. So you kind of, did just now. Is that something that you would consider making into one of the resources on, like, the SSA page, where it would be, kind of the do's and don'ts of an op-ed? Because there is information on there about press releases, but I don't remember seeing anything about op-eds on there. Is that something you would be interested in doing?
Oh yeah, I would love to make that a resource. I would love to see all of you like writing in your local newspaper, giving a voice to secularism and atheism and talking about timely issues that affect all of us. And so I'd be happy to provide those resources, the do's and don'ts. I've kind of just learned how to write op-eds by reading them. I read a lot. And so in reading them, I kind of see what the format is. And so I'd love to help anybody out that would be interested. In the blue shirt?
If I can respond to the last question, I would say if your school has a journalism program, even if you're not involved in it at all, reach out to a random journalism professor, the department head, because professors love you if you want to write and learn how to do stuff. If you want to learn how to do something, a professor will be like, oh, I can teach something. Usually, at least that's been my experience. Your students, but yeah.
Oh, I definitely agree. I think you should always reach out to your professors, especially journalism professors, whenever you're writing something. Every time I would write something, I would have my paralegal professor proof it. And he proofed it so much, he's like, Amanda, I don't have any more corrections. I'm like, no, you have something else to tell me that I can improve on. And yeah, so that's a great way. And you're also forming connections with your university professors and getting them involved as well. Sure.
Yes, so what are ways that you can use these steps that you've mentioned to try to promote for whether it's a separation of church and state or whether it's protecting the civil liberties of all individuals, whether they're LGBT or otherwise, if you're trying to reform state laws in states that are maybe not progressive or maybe are more difficult to try to change legally, like, for example, many states in the South or many states in the Midwest.
So the question is, how do you get stuff done in states that don't want to have anything done, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I work, now I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm trying to get involved on a national scale, but before then I did all of my work in Alabama, so I understand the hostility. And so a lot of times what will happen is that we will not make official victories. We may not get a bill passed. Unfortunately, there still has not been an amendment to our Alabama hate crime law that would protect sexual orientation and gender identity, but there is discussion generated, and that's really, really important because the legislators are coming out and saying, hey, a certain group in Congress, in our state Congress, is not supporting this. They don't have the interests of people at heart, and then that puts pressure on them. And so while I can't really give you exact ways to secure official victories, I would still encourage you to do do all of this and to keep doing what you're doing, because if it can generate discussion, then I think that's a victory.
And then how are ways you could get, like, whether our judicial system or our federal government involved in trying to reform, the state laws that, may not protect the civil liberties of all citizens or may not promote the suppression of church and state?
Okay, so what you can do with that is contact your federal congressman, and from there they can write a letter to say, just say for instance, you feel that your state is not protecting LGBT people, or it's not protecting racial minorities. You could contact your federal congressperson, and they could ask the Justice Department to launch an investigation officially. So that's a good way to get the federal government involved when they otherwise may not have been.
It was said in your introduction that you've received death threats multiple times. So my question is kind of, how do you generate all this material while at the same time kind of protecting yourself?
That's a really, really good question. And I think self-care is really important. So I am conflicted about the fact that I have left Alabama. I now live in Washington, D.C. I transferred into Georgetown, so I'm no longer on the ground in Alabama fighting for these progressive causes. And I think the reason why I left was for my personal health and my personal safety. And so what I've done is I've taken myself out of that environment while simultaneously supporting those who are still there. But I get involved on a national level because it's better for me personally. Anyone?
There are some secular student alliances with memberships that are very resistant towards taking political stances. Do you have any advice to leaders who would like to convince their members to do something?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know that in Mobile, for example, our primary atheist group is social in nature, and it doesn't necessarily get involved in activism. And a lot of people will want social groups, but they don't want advocacy groups. They think that's reserved for other people. And so what I would say is encourage it, not necessarily require it as a part of your membership, but just show them the benefits of getting involved. For example, really show them that getting involved in the community promotes atheism. It promotes the belief that we are good people, that we have values and things like that. So get them to see the pros of it, and maybe they'll voluntarily get involved.
You mentioned that you got contacted by some politicians after your op-ed. So I was just curious, what happened after you got contacted? Did they do anything, or did anything?
So they had reintroduced the bill in the state legislature, and I believe it was ultimately tabled. I think it received a favorable report in one subcommittee. I believe it may have been in the Senate. I don't know the exact details. But basically what happened is they reintroduced the legislation, and they promised to start talking to more people in the legislature about these issues. But ultimately, unfortunately, nothing can get passed as long as we have, a majority of the state legislators who don't see this as an issue. And so it did generate discussion, but unfortunately nothing official happened with it. All right, well, if that's it, then thank you very much.